I used to believe love made you fearless, that when you held the right hand, nothing bad could happen. Lucas's fingers rested on mine as the car moved deeper into the dark. No streetlights, no signal, just the sound of tires on gravel and my heartbeat slowly changing its rhythm. You tell yourself it's just the shadows. You look at the man you've known for 3 years and you try to find the person who brought you soup when you were sick, but all you see is a silhouette you no longer recognize. You feel the weight of his hand, and suddenly it doesn't feel like a gesture of affection anymore. It feels like a restraint. You want to pull away, but you're terrified of what happens if you break the silence. Something felt wrong. You watch the GPS spin in circles, a frantic little arrow lost in a sea of black, and you realize you are exactly where he wants you. You start to catalog every time he's ever been slightly too quiet, every time his jokes felt a bit too sharp. You wonder how you missed the way the air in the car has become so heavy you can barely swallow. You want to ask him to turn around, but you're afraid that if you speak, you'll confirm that the man beside you isn't the man you love. But love has a way of convincing you that fear is just imagination. You tell yourself you're being dramatic. You tell yourself that the cold sweat on your neck is just the air conditioning. You choose to believe the lie because the truth, the idea that you've walked yourself right into a trap, is a cliff you aren't ready to jump off yet. The car slows, the gravel stops crunching, and you realize that your imagination was the only thing keeping you safe.
The lookout was silent, too silent. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel like peace, but like a held breath. Wind rushed past us like whispers that didn't want to be heard, tugging at her hair and whistling through the gaps in the rusted guardrail. The city lights below flickered beautiful, like a sea of fallen stars, and impossibly distant. Maya remembers thinking how easy it would be to disappear there. Up here, the world she knew is just a smudge of orange and white on a canvas of black. You look down at those lights, and you realize that if you screamed, the sound would just dissolve into the wind before it ever reached a paved road. You look at the dashboard clock, 1:14 a.m. You wonder why our spot, the little bistro with the chipped mugs, or the park with the weeping willow, wasn't enough for tonight. Maya asked herself why he drove 40 minutes past the last gas station just to stand on a patch of dirt where the air is 10 degrees colder and the ground feels like it's crumbling beneath your boots. Lucas didn't look at the view. He didn't even glance at the horizon he'd promised was breathtaking. He looked at Maya. Something felt wrong. She felt a sudden, frantic urge to check the car doors, to see if they're still unlocked, but she didn't move. She was frozen by the politeness of love, paralyzed by the fear of being wrong about him, because if she's right, then the last 3 years of her life were just a long walk to the edge of this cliff.
When he reached into his jacket, my heart leapt into my throat. You feel that sudden, dizzying rush of adrenaline that you mistake for joy. You think about the 3 years, the shared secrets, the way he always knew exactly how you took your coffee. You think, this is it. The moment every storybook promised you. You expect the velvet box. You expect him to drop to one knee on the gravel and ask to hold your hand forever. You even start to feel guilty for the fear you felt just moments ago, ashamed that you ever doubted him. But then, his hand emerged. He didn't pull out a ring. He pulled out my phone. My stomach dropped, falling faster and harder than I ever could from this height. You look at the device in his hand, the screen cracked, the battery dead, and you realize he must have taken it from your bag while you were looking at the lights. You were going to leave, he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was flat, empty. It was the sound of a judge delivering a sentence he'd already written. You look at him and the confusion hits you like a physical blow. You want to scream that he's wrong, that you love him, but the words die in your throat because you see the way he's holding your phone like it's a piece of evidence. You realized you hadn't just been dramatic. You had been right. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't afraid of losing me. He didn't care about the us I'd spent years building. He wasn't heartbroken or desperate. He was afraid of what I remembered. I stepped back without thinking. It was a primitive reflex, the body's desperate attempt to create space between you and a threat you finally recognize. My foot brushed loose gravel near the edge, the stones skittering away into the abyss, silent long before they ever hit the ground. That sound, that hollow, dry sliding of earth, was the key that turned the lock. The memory hit me like a scream I'd buried alive. You try to keep those sounds down, don't you? You pack them into the darkest corners of your mind and cover them with the mundane details of a happy life. Brunch dates, choosing paint colors, the warmth of Lucas's chest against your back. But standing here, with the wind trying to pull the breath from your lungs and the man you love holding the only evidence of your betrayal, the walls finally give way, the argument. You can smell it again, the sharp scent of rain on hot asphalt, the copper tang of adrenaline. You remember the way the air felt too thick to breathe, the words flying like jagged glass. You didn't want to be that person. You didn't want to be the girl with the shaking hands and the wild eyes. The shove. It was so fast. A heartbeat. A fraction of a second where your anger became a physical force. A blind reflex of get away from me. You feel the phantom ghost of that impact in your palms, even now the solid, terrifying resistance of a chest. And then nothing. Just air. The sound of a body hitting stone. It wasn't like the movies. There was no dramatic music, no poetic pause, just a sickening, wet thud that seemed to echo inside your own bones. You stood at the top of a different height that night, staring down at a shape that didn't move, realizing that the world had ended in the time it took to blink. I hadn't planned to kill anyone. You tell yourself that every morning when you wake up. You whisper it to your reflection while you brush your teeth. You try to convince yourself that a lack of intent makes you innocent, but your reflection never believes you. You look at Lucas now, holding your phone, the phone that contains the draft of a confession you never sent, or perhaps the photos you took before you panicked and you realize he's been watching you rot from the inside out. But guilt doesn't care about plans. Guilt is a living thing. It's a parasite that feeds on the silence you've kept. You realize now why he brought you here. This isn't about him hurting you. It's about him owning you. He doesn't want to throw you off this cliff. He wants you to know that he's the only thing keeping you from the fall. He's not your protector. He's your cage. You look at the city lights again, and they don't look like stars anymore. They look like 1,000 eyes, all waiting for you to trip. All waiting for the truth to finally catch up to the girl who thought she could run forever. Then I saw the lights. Red. Blue. Silent. They didn't scream the way sirens should. They just existed bleeding through the trees, washing over the road, staining the night like a warning I was too late to understand. Police cars emerged from the darkness one by one, doors opening in unison, shadows stepping out with hands already resting on holsters. Lucas raised his hands before I could speak, before I could think. "That's her," he said calmly. "No panits." No hesitation. She just admitted it. The words didn't register at first. They floated, weightless, unreal. As if they belonged to another story, another woman. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Just air, cold and useless. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to grab him, shake him, ask why. But my voice betrayed me, just like my memory had. Because memory isn't only what you forget. It's also what you never stop remembering. Images flickered behind my eyes like broken film frames. A cliff edge carved against a palest sky. Wind howling so loud it swallowed every thought. Ryan's laugh nervous, unsteady, asking if Lucas was sure this was funny. I hadn't been invited that day. No one knew I followed. I remembered hiding behind the rocks, heart hammering, watching two brothers stand at the edge of the world. I remembered the moment Lucas stepped closer. Not angry, not rushed, just deliberate. A shove, a stumble. And then, that sound, wet, final, silence. An officer stepped closer, boots crunching against gravel that suddenly sounded deafening. "Ma'am, turn around slowly." Lucas didn't look at me. Not once. That's when it hit me. He wasn't afraid because he'd already lived this moment over and over. Every word rehearsed. Every pause calculated. He'd always wondered if I knew. I saw it in the way his questions circled me for 2 years. In the way his eyes lingered when Ryan's name came up. In the way he watched me pack my bags last week. A new city. A new job. A clean disappearance. That's when he knew. I searched his face for doubt, for guilt, anything. But all I saw was relief. Because I was the only witness. And witnesses who leave become risks. As the cuffs closed around my wrists, a thought whispered through the fog in my head, quiet but terrifyingly clear. I didn't need to remember everything. I only needed to remember one thing. And Lucas knew exactly how to erase the rest.
As the handcuffs closed around her wrists, the metal biting into skin still warm from fear, she looked at him one last time. Not to plead, not to beg, just to understand. His eyes were peaceful. Not empty, not cold, settled. The kind of calm that comes only after something heavy has finally been set down. Relieved. And in that stillness, something inside Maya broke open. It wasn't a thought at first. It was a feeling sharp, sinking, undeniable. A recognition so clear it hurt. The cliff came back to her in fragments. Wind clawing at her hair. The smell of dust and pine. The way Lucas had stood too close to the edge, steady as stone, while someone else fell. She finally saw the pattern. The careful timing. The rehearsed tenderness. The sudden urgency to get her alone. The ring. The view. The promise of forever whispered like a prayer. It was never a proposal. It was a return. He never brought her there to ask her to be his wife. He brought her there because the cliff remembered him. Because it was quiet. Because it erased witnesses. Because it finished stories without leaving fingerprints. He brought her there to finish what he started. Her breath caught as the truth settled fully into place, not loud, not dramatic, just final. She wasn't meant to say yes. She was meant to fall. And as the officers guided her away, the night swallowing her whole, Maya realized the cruelest part of all. He hadn't been afraid she would leave him. He had been afraid she would remember.
And the most terrifying part, he loved me enough to destroy me, because I was the only witness he couldn't kill.
If this story meant something to you, don't let it end here. Subscribe, because every week, we share stories that remind you who you're becoming. And if you know someone who needs this message, send it to them.